Hey, my name is Christopher Schroeder. I'm the co-founder of Next Billion Ventures. We do venture investing in Asia, Middle East, Latin America, and a little bit of Africa. I was the CEO of WashingtonPost.com, and I'm the author of the best-selling Startup Rising, the Entrepreneurial Revolution, Remaking the Middle East. And I'm often asked, what is the greatest tech innovation to debate today? And we certainly could have a great discussion about AI, machine learning, genomics, and more. But for me, the most important and least understood revolution in tech today is not the tech itself, but rather the near universal access to it. As we all know, 60, 70, 80% of humanity has a smart device, a supercomputer in their pocket, which not only unleashes innovation and problem solving anywhere, but literally billions of new consumers with very specific needs everywhere. And it's the earliest innings, as the best in capabilities I mentioned, like AI and genomics, are equally universally accessible. It completely upends where innovation will come from. China, of course, is exhibit A for this shift, but there are many and not so many Chinas now, from Jakarta to Istanbul to Nairobi to Tallinn to Sao Paulo and beyond. It's nothing short of a new globalism. And we have amazing people with us today helping to lead the charge. So I'd love to start, if I could, with Pieter KEMPS, who's a principal of SEQUOIA and SURGE, the latter being their globally admired seed fund and accelerator program. He sits on the boards of and mentors some of their leading entrepreneurs in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and has a remarkable career as an entrepreneur in his own right, as a point bridge between VCs, accelerators, and innovation ecosystems for Amazon's AWS. And Pieter, I'd love, if you could, to right set us, if you can. I mean, SEQUOIA is one of the truly global first firms out there. The rest of Silicon Valley barely does it. You guys walk the talk. China, India, Israel, South Asia, Southeast Asia. What do you all see that the Valley seems to be missing, and why?
Yeah, I think, and thanks for that introduction. Great to be here. I think, initially SEQUOIA, when launched in Silicon Valley, it was very focused on the Valley itself. And our late founder, Don Valentine, was once said that he would only invest in companies that he could reach in an hour and a half on his bicycle. And so it was very focused geographically. And then through a trip to China, the eyes opened and the world opened, and over 15 years ago moved into China, then moved into India, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's interesting is that we have this unique vantage points on the back of that, and we have this unique ability to see global dynamics, trends, differences, similarities, and things like that. And let me give you one example. At some stage, we met two very interesting founders here in Southeast Asia that started this company called Gojek. And many folks outside might not have heard of it. They had not launched an app in Jakarta, a motorcycle taxi is called an Ojek. And so Gojek is a play on the word, right? And we chatted with them before they launched their app. They wanted to launch an app just with transport. And some of the team had just come back from a trip to China. And what we saw in China in our portfolio is what we saw in India in our portfolio as well. And that was back then, and this is like 6 years ago-ish, the rise of like hyperlocal food, hyperlocal shopping, etc. And the founders in our portfolio in these categories had one big problem. Like, they needed delivery guys, right? And you're not gonna deliver some ramen noodles for $3 in a car. That doesn't work out from an economics point of view. So all these guys had to build a network of motorcycle delivery guys. And so when we had seen that dynamic and we met this founder, we said, listen, it's very interesting what you have here, but you already have like, a few thousand drivers on your platform. Why don't you also leverage that supply side liquidity, so to speak, to launch a much broader platform of delivery, of food, of delivery, of shopping, and all these different things. Debated for a week. Initially, he didn't want it. And then ultimately he said, hey, that actually makes sense. And when he launched the app, it immediately became a platform. So this was the first app where you didn't enter into the map view like you would have with Uber or with Grab or with other players. But you would enter, and there were 4 big circles: ride, send, shop, and food. And you would pick your use case and then go. So this whole platform strategy came on the back of some of these trends that SEQUOIA had been seeing globally, and the team obviously executed miraculously on that. And so that's just one example of where you see trends and where this platform strategy, whether it's WeChat or whether it's Gojek or whether it's Paytm, we see a very different approach to building product than, for example, in the US, where it's much more around focus, an absolute focus on one thing, because the market is so broad and so deep in the US that you can build a very large company with just one very specifically strong product. One of the things that's very different in Asia from what we see.
You know, Peter, what's so interesting in listening to you tell the Gojek story, one of the things I've observed is that there's so much shared among rising market entrepreneurs that doesn't matter how geographic dispersed in culture and history they have, where it comes down to last mile logistics or navigating regulation or educating a consumer force that's never done fintech before to do fintech overall. More is shared among rising markets than with Silicon Valley. I wonder what your experience has been.
Yeah, listen, I think that's true, and there are fundamental differences between many emerging markets and then the West. And one of the things we sometimes say is whether you're in Europe or whether you're in the US, very mature market, very established structures, lots of infrastructure available, and so your line from A to B and from C to A and B and C and how you develop is a bit more linear. Like we sometimes say in the US, when you build, for example, a SaaS company, it's a race, right? It's a race from here to there. You know how you need to go, and that's it. In Asia, where it's much more ambiguous, much more fluid, much more chaotic, it's much more of a maze. And we've seen all these companies that meander and evolve, and ultimately they're much different now than what they were beginning. So we literally call it race versus maze. In the US, it's often a race, and in Asia, it's a maze. And so there's a lot of differences. Some similarities for sure, right? Founder quality is a key thing you look at. What we see in these markets, and with SEQUOIA, we've been investing here in 6, 7 different nationalities or countries and 15 different nationalities. It's sometimes hard to assess founder quality, but it's still one of the #1 things that you look for. Market size, still one of the #1 things you look for. And in some markets like Vietnam or Philippines, you have to take a much longer view because the market size isn't there yet, but it'll come. But you look for that. Customer love, like whether you're in the US or in Europe or in Asia, if there's no customer love, there's no business, right? So some of these things at the meta level, very similar.
That's fascinating. David Nangle is the co-founder and CEO of VOSTOK Emerging Finance, one of the legendary investors in global financial innovation. His background has been at ING Barings Emerging Markets Research Team and 10 years at Renaissance Capital with years of expertise in Russia. And David, similarly, I mean, these seem to be the period of financial inclusion, right? Large swaths of the world are literally unbanked. Millions of businesses cannot easily and reliably get credit. Could you break down for us, if you could, in all this opportunity, how you focus on sector and geographies and why?
Yeah, super, Chris, and thanks for the use of the word legendary. I'll always take that. But look, so what do we do at FEF? We invest in fintech across emerging markets. So it's quite a focused strategy, but it's definitely a broad strategy with many geographies and many subsegments therein. And I guess what we found from our learnings, you kind of talked about, financial inclusion and reaching the unbanked and underbanked, and that is definitely one subsegment of it. But I guess I'd put it in 2 segments. I'd say, there's developed emerging markets and, Turkey, Russia, Brazil, which are more akin to the developed markets. And what we see from a fintech, which is what we do, playbook, a lot of it is copy, paste, replicate with some local flavor. Not that simple, but variations of that. And we've invested successfully in Turkey, for example, in a payments company called EasyCo, online payments. We exited that company. It was a phenomenal investment for us. But that's effectively the Stripe or Adyen of the Turkish market. And all the guys who basically went back to Turkey to build this were ex-Stripe, Klarna, PayPal, etc. So we backed them. There was a broad-based playbook, and the bigger boys weren't in Turkey for all the local nuances and reasons why the big boys from the States go to Europe but don't go to Russia or Turkey and Pakistan. And long may that continue for people like us, so we can back these players. But then there's the other side of the coin, which is, I guess, what you touched upon, the financial inclusion or underbanked. And that's more the Africas, the Pakistans, or more frontiersy markets, no disrespect to them, versus the more developed emerging. And then it becomes a different playbook. It's about, financial education. It's about, simple P2P payments. At a first derivative, it's getting cash into digital. Before you get into the more exotic, let's call them products of credit investments, and then online and the penetration therein. And I think from an investor point of view, like the easier thing to do is copy, paste, replicate, and execute. And that's been the shorter duration from dollar in to return on capital for us. The longer game, but arguably the deeper moats, is in the frontiers when you're attacking that big tranche of underbanked. And that's when the new financial models come out for those markets. So I guess it's a different playbook for each. And I guess when it comes to, just to wrap it up, when it comes to financial services and fintech, this whole globalization aspect, and there's a lot of new economy areas like e-commerce, mobility, etc., that have this global wave to them. When it comes to financial services and fintech, there's a strong local to overlay with global learnings as opposed to globalization, one size fits all, and Stripe and Square are going to take over the world.
It's amazing, Dave. I think that if we think about what's really been unleashed and the big difference in the last 3 to 4 years in what you just described so well, it's got to be the access to the data, right? And I mean, again, China's Exhibit A of this. But all of a sudden, we don't think about credit scoring the same way. We don't think about how to take long bureaucratic processes to bring small businesses into the fore here. How do you think about this unique access to data and how it really adds gasoline to the fire of what's happening in financial opportunity?
Yeah, look, we clearly welcome it. I think China's been the benchmark and the playbook, and we always use China for learnings, not for investing. Where do we start? Where do we stop? But the learnings out of China and what Tencent and Alibaba have done, on that front, while the banks weren't really watching, while the regulators allowed them, it's not to be replicated everywhere, but variations and aspects of it can be. But you take what they did on the data front, and data, whether it's for small businesses, which are arguably the bigger part of unbanked or underbanked, as well as the consumer, everybody with a smartphone, everybody with data and financial access, it becomes a big part of it. And I guess two examples from our side, just to give you color. One is the unbanked or underbanked consumer in Africa. We've got a company called Jumo in our portfolio, which effectively scores individuals off the back of their mobile data. Simple pay-as-you-go top up, how regular they're topping up, what they do in their phones, how often they're paying, what they're paying for, and that becomes a digital footprint that you can then score them on and give them their first loan. And their first loan can be $1, and that money can be digitized going straight to the phone via mobile money, and they pay back via mobile money. All of a sudden, you're included in the financial system, and you have a growing footprint. And then in Mexico, it's amazing how certain countries take the forefront of different areas, but Mexico's been at the forefront of digitization of information and data for companies. Invoice data, tax filings, all digitized. So it means another company in our portfolio, Confio, can go and access that data and score that data. So as a small business, a bank won't touch you because of the amount of man hours to score your accounts and meet you and process your loan. And Confio can do it in less than an hour. Based on the data that's there. You still need to do it right. You still need to score correctly. Data doesn't make everything easy and positive, but it's a great underbelly for building a business.
And unleashing literally billions of people and hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world. It's just amazing days we're living in. Manuel Schoenfeld is hard to capture in a sentence. He's the founder of PowerX, the SEQUOIA Scout, Antler, and Y Combinator-backed solution to make water heating more efficient and cost-effective, with, of course, massive ramifications on our environment. He's advised governments, worked with McKinsey and the World Bank, but his tenacity was formed on the anvil of China as a young man. He worked in one of the poorest communities with families with autistic children. He slept literally on cardboard floors and made $150 a month. He also contracted meningitis, a brain disease which could have forever limited his potential, but a few years later, he achieved the highest grades in the history of his university and went on this amazing global journey. And Manuel, I really like to start there if I could. You had this amazing experience in China and around the world. In McKinsey, you referred to as the passport to the world for you. What did you see early on in this rapidly changing globe? And how did you get on the path that you're on right now?
Yeah, Chris, thanks a lot for this intro and great to be here. So on your first question, traveling the world, I saw that humans with a vision can bring about really incredible change. So, for instance, when I worked in China, the lady who had founded our Center for Autistic Children had the vision to help her autistic son. And by today, she has helped like thousands of Chinese families with their autistic children. Others, again, then have the vision to send rockets to Mars. And I think it's not before long that we actually, as a human race, set foot on another planet. So people with a vision can really change the trajectory of our planet, and realizing that set me on my current path. My vision personally is to empower everyone to make a dent in the fight against climate change.
There's so many areas of climate change that you could have broken into, and you have this wonderful quote where you said, "I fell in love with renewable energy." Why and how did you choose water as the place to really kind of wedge into the important impact you're making?
You know, I'm focused on water heating because water heaters use a lot of energy and they can also store a lot of energy. So that's just a massive resource that lies dormant in every home, in every basement. And we offer a plug and play device that runs water heaters more efficiently, that works with most water heaters out there. But we also use artificial intelligence in these devices to save energy. And beyond that, we convert these water heaters to batteries. By then connecting these batteries across the globe, what we are really building with PowerX is actually the world's largest distributed water battery. And such a battery can save more CO2 than, for example, the Black Forest in Germany.
Unbelievable. Bahadır, ÖZDEMİR, you could have saved me massive time and money over the last decade had your company, AIRALO, been there. You're looking to disrupt the global telecom industry with a simple but revolutionary idea that physical SIM cards should be replaced with virtual ones. Now, they do so in 160 countries. Now, this is your third company, having introduced great innovation and efficiency to shipping industry. And Ahmet, in a way, you are the facilitator of this new globalism we've been describing. By definition, your idea was global day one. Take us a little bit on the journey of why you thought this was an important and such a large opportunity for our times.
Well, thank you, Chris, for the introduction. I think we started global for a very simple reason. The pain itself is truly global. Connectivity, especially overseas connectivity for travelers, it's not a local problem. Anyone in the world going from A to B, and to be specific, 1.2 billion people before COVID, of course, would need connectivity one way or another when they go to a next destination. Now, it's amazing how people solve these problems. 55% of the world never activate a roaming plan. 55% of this 1.2 billion people, they actually land in their destination and spend 40 minutes at an airport to find a local SIM card. The rest of the world activate expensive roaming plans, come back home, and then they get sad because they just came back to a $1,000, $2,000 roaming bill. The problem itself is so universal and so painful for travelers. We decided, you know what, this is a problem that we can solve globally. And the very nature of this is very global. You know, think about roaming. Now, we are disrupting roaming, to be honest, but think about roaming. You don't say things like, first Singaporeans should test roaming, then, you know, people from Panama should test it, then people from United States should test it. It's just a very universal problem that appeals to the international audience. So this is how we started, and we made sure we had eSIMs for 190 countries from day one. We cover almost all around the world. So even if you go to the Reunion Islands, many people haven't heard of it, you can find an eSIM for Reunion Islands on AIRALO. And we were pretty amazed, you know, in our third month, we actually served people from 162 countries. We were surprised how many people from how many different countries truly had that pain. So yeah, the very nature of this forced us to be global from day one.
You know, Bahadır, it just blows me away how you just became global so quickly. I mean, you know, the old playbook used to be win Turkey, win a couple of countries nearby, and kind of success breeds success. And you stood up in all these countries almost overnight. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like and what the trade-offs were, both positive and maybe surprises when you actually did it?
Well, I think one of the things that we ask ourselves when we started was, as any other business will do, you know, does this process need any local work, in a sense? Like, are there any regulations that we need to solve country by country? Do we really need any local operations, or can we just acquire customers purely via online channels, purely via the global platforms? And basically, these are the questions that we asked ourselves. And the answer was yes. You know, the answer was we could acquire customers. While our marketing team was in Singapore, we could actually tell people in Panama that something like this exists and you can use it in your next travel. So the going global was not difficult, to be honest. Once we had the marketing game, once we had the playbook in place, and once we stick with the growth principles that we do in every country, once we stick with the growth marketing strategy that we apply in general, it kind of worked for everyone, to be honest. But one of the things that surprised us globally was, I think that's something we were not ready for. Giving customer support to someone from Brazil was a little bit different than giving customer support to someone from Singapore. Now, I'm not going to go into the details, which one was more entitled, which one wanted more things, but in the end of the day, we observed that the questions were a bit different than each other. Now, one country will say things like, I imagine one day we did a 1 gigabyte free campaign in the middle of COVID-19. We were proud of that. We were giving free connectivity to tons of people around the world. And some countries would simply say, thank you so much. Can you show me the details, how I can activate my data, things like that, right? And we are ready for that. Then another country would say, 1 gigabyte. That's it? That's all you are giving me? Like, when did you get entitled to more free stuff? Like, can you tell me, like, and it's a very cultural thing between those two countries. One country simply doesn't like the amount of free stuff you give. The other one simply says, thank you guys, I truly appreciate this. And I would like to learn how I can do this. So I think one trade-off was we weren't fully ready for the type of support that was needed, for the type of questions that would come. Because one thing, Chris, about eSIM business is that we were at the forefront. Nobody ever purchased an eSIM before, until we started selling those. So it's a product that nobody used before. And it's a product a company is giving support for the first time. So they don't know exactly what they are buying. We are very new at supporting what we are selling. So there was a lot of miscommunication when we started, but things are definitely solved right now, and I believe we are on the right path. We can now understand different cultures much easier. And we do have a support system that follows the sun. So we are scattered all around the world. Our support team speaks multiple languages. They sit from Brazil to Japan. So we cover all around the world with different languages and with different cultures, I would say.
Pieter, Dave, I'm dying to hear your reaction to this as investors. When an entrepreneur comes to you and pitches a big global vision like this, obviously you love it, but at the same time, you got to think about the trade-off between focus and how to look at this. And so, Pieter, start with you, and then Dave, if you could just join in. How do you think about this as investors?
Yeah, I think frankly, it was a very short decision cycle with Bahadır. I think we like ambitious founders. Our motto is to help the daring build legendary companies. And so we're always enamored by big visions and by companies that have a global perspective, and I think Bahadır delivered that vision with a lot of compelling vision and a strong pitch behind it. I think what's interesting is we see this more and more, and it actually to some extent is sometimes challenging, because I'm actually right now involved at this very moment in 2-3 new investments where we have to constantly align with our team in China, with our team in the US. Which territory is this? And the founders are here, but the market is there, and we have all these truly global companies where it's no longer a China company or a Hong Kong company or a Singapore company or a US company, but we have all these different situations, and very often these companies are global from day one. We recently signed a term sheet with a small company in a Southeast Asia country that in 7 months from launch had 300,000 monthly active users, $1 million of annual recurring revenue. I think no one in the globe knew that they were from this small country in Southeast Asia. And they if you would look at their site and their product, it was as if it was Silicon Valley or whatever. We backed a few years ago. We backed another company that was born in Turkey called Insider. We backed it out of Singapore. Why? Because more than half of their revenue and their largest customers were all in Southeast Asia and the rest of Asia. And right now they're active in 25 different markets. And at the global G2 crowd and Gartner, etc. They're leaders against the odds in a way, and competing and beating like large companies like Adobe or Salesforce or whatever in certain specific segments. And so I think boundaries are truly blurring. And again, for an investor that has a certain structure, that is sometimes a challenge. But first and foremost, it's super exciting to see that innovation truly comes from everywhere, that founders are no longer caring about borders, but just seeing and addressing this global opportunity. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Dave?
Yeah, look, I fully respect what Bahadır is doing and the businesses he's built, and they're naturally global. And obviously, Pieter's comments back that up. I'm actually the totally other side of the coin, and maybe it's a function of emerging markets. Maybe it's probably more of a function of financial services and what we do, and how it's single currency regulators in border. I get quite nauseous when I see a pitch book with global vision and arrows going all over the world. I hate founders coming at me saying they're going to take over the world. And especially when it's a Turkish founder, a Pakistani founder, a Brazilian founder. That's no offense to those countries, but the size and the shape of those countries. If I see a founder at a seed or Series A stage and they say, yeah, global vision, and I go, you've got 100 to 200 million people in your backyard. You haven't even got one of them as part of your customer base yet. Let's own local. Whether it's the biggest successes that we have had so far is in that uber focus of single scale market opportunity and single scale product. And once obviously that is delivered upon, going into either other products in that single scale market or other markets with that product, or a bit of both, and just increasing the TAM, we're all behind it. And where we've destroyed the most value is where we've backed people to do too many countries or too many things at the same time before they can walk. It doesn't mean you can't have everything, and maybe it's a function of segment, but that's been our history and track record with it.
Dave, let me maybe respond to that, if that's okay. Frankly, I fully agree, and I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. It very much depends on the business model. Like when we invest in fintech, and it's a regulated environment, please don't tell me that you're going in 30 markets at the same time. No way. Like one country, and then if you do really well and you earn the right, you go to the second, right? And that's it. And the same with marketplaces, where you have to build liquidity of supply, liquidity of demand that is local. No way that you want a global pitch. But for some products that are purely software, or Bahadır's case, there is an opportunity sometimes, but you really have to be smart around for which business model should you be hyper-focused and hyper-local and go for one market, and in which case say, hey, this is software. The incremental cost of going after other markets, is so small that it doesn't matter. So it's very much a business model decision. So your point on specifically on fintech is very valid, and I would agree with you.
No, I agree. And don't get me wrong, I'm proven wrong more. Do we have a view? We know it works most of the time in the first iterations, and then I've got things that I passed upon that just come back to bite me, and I go, yeah, missed that one.
So Manuel, I'd love your perspective as an operator. How do you think about your own business and about being global day one, or how you grow and the challenges that you found?
That is a very good question. I think, as Pieter also stressed, like some business models are just inherently more global than others, and it does really depend on the category you are pursuing. So if you're a Google, you just change the language of your search button. If you're a Tesla, there's just so much more you have to think about, charging infrastructure and so on. So we are a bit in the middle of both these companies. We do have hardware pieces, but they are off the shelf. We do have a very large software AI component, and that works pretty much across the globe. What we are currently doing is that we try to leverage the benefits of globalization for our company and avoid the pitfalls. So, for example, employing well-trained machine learning engineers from Vietnam for $25 per hour is just a great part of globalization and very helpful for a startup to be scrappy and to find your place. At the same time, you also have to be very careful with the pitfalls, like enforcing your IP in a foreign country, or maybe building everything and handing everything over on a silver platter to certain manufacturers. So in the case of PowerX, I think we landed in a pretty sweet spot in that we have engineers originally from the Middle East, developers from India, and actually a mold maker from Istanbul. And we did position our our hardware and software to be globally applicable, very very quickly, non-invasive, do-it-yourself applicable to many different forms and sizes. That being said, even though that's how we set our company up, that's how we set PowerX up, we are actually starting and focusing on the US first and make sure we walk there before we run other markets.
You know, one of the amazing things you're all talking about is this sort of mix between, if you understand local very well, not, you know, the hands dirty aspect of local, you actually have not only competitive advantage, but you have an opportunity to take that learning and go into other parts of the markets. But what is so interesting is that a lot of these big companies in market and out of markets are actually thinking about how they can become very local because of data advantages, because of all their ability to hire talent. And so I'm wondering, Bahadır, I'll start with you, how you think about this kind of dynamic of understanding local, but at the same time being up against global major competitors who are not insophisticated when it comes to coming at you, even when you think you have local barriers in your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave the details to the fintech people in the room, you know, when it comes to fintech. But I think one of the things that makes sense is that when you have a local presence and when you start understanding that market, I do feel like it's just it's a very natural instinct to be able to you know, cross-sell anything else to the same audience. You know the audience, you have recognized them, you know how they act, you know how they behave, and I do feel like it's a very natural instinct. Even with AIRALO, I know this is not a local game, but even with AIRALO, we are sometimes thinking, and that's something that we didn't think before, but we realized many OTAs, many travel companies, no fintechs yet, approached us and saying, guys, you know how travelers behave now. Like, you have learned how they behave. You know when they are buying eSIM. You exactly know when somebody is planning to go to Germany. You exactly know when somebody is going to Venezuela. Would you be able to open to selling our products to the same people? So my simple observation would be, you know, I think it's inevitable once you start observing a certain behavior in your audience. You know, it's just a natural instinct to be able to offer them anything else that might be interesting to them, and that's a request that comes from our customers too. There are customers who ask us if we can actually. These questions came many times, and I don't know why they think that if we can offer them travel insurance. No, we cannot right now. At least not for now. You know, we only have eSIMs. But yeah, that will be my observation. You know, it's just a natural instinct, in my opinion.
Pieter, how do you think about it?
Yeah, maybe one thing to add. I mean, I think many global companies are actually not very good at localizing, and we've seen that many times. If you think about Uber coming into Southeast Asia, ultimately they didn't have enough local context. If they did find out stuff, then they needed to get it into the global code base, and just the agility is often not there. And so Grab, kind of like won that Southeast Asia battle. But in Indonesia, it's the opposite. And Gojek has the local context and did many things from the ground up with such a nuanced understanding of local consumers, of local behaviors, and they're the largest. And we see that equally with Tokopedia, also an investment from SEQUOIA, and by most accounts the largest marketplace in Indonesia. There's been many others that came, some backed by SK, some backed by eBay, some backed by JD. In China, all big players, but it was this local guy from a small village in Sumatra that has built a business that by some accounts is valued in the $8 to $10 billion at some stage, and survived and outcompeted all these global guys that came in to go after that much valued Indonesian market. And so not always, like, you have to have a really good product and you have to have that really good understanding. It's not like, oh, you'll beat these global guys. But if you have a really good product, that home turf advantage can be extremely strong.
Dave, I think particularly in your area, fintech, every ride-sharing company certainly says they're going to get into payments and then maybe other financial services. E-commerce companies are certainly doing payments and are talking about other services. Certainly Alibaba and Ant is now offering a huge panoply of quote-unquote financial services in China. How do you think about that when someone pitches you an idea in the areas of fintech when so many people, again, with lots of capital, lots of experience, lots of talent, lots of data, want to be there?
Yeah, no, it's look, I think the evolution of our investment thesis and mindset has changed with the evolution of where big tech is going. And I think the future of finance is everywhere, and that's something we've had to accept. You know, it was banks and payments companies, and then fintech. You know, monoline fintech attacking multiple lines of a bank's incumbent services is what was our first derivative playbook. Now the future of finance. You know, Pieter touched on Grab and Gojek and names like that. The future of finance in Southeast Asia can come from ride sharing and mobility. You know, China's proved that the future of finance comes out of social media and e-commerce. Mercado Libre in Latin America could end up being the biggest financial services provider across that continent. So increasingly, when we're looking to make our investments into these countries, you know, we're broadening the remit. It still is fintech. We do see a payments, credit, or an aspect of those businesses, you know, being in pure financial services. But it can be 5%, 10% today, with the future being that the future of finance in a consumer or SME or other space in that specific country is coming from a place that you wouldn't have thought of 10 years ago.
I had a friend in China who was a fintech entrepreneur some years ago who said to me, Dave, just to pull on that string, that there's not a lot of white space for fintech startups in China anymore because of the juggernauts. Do you agree with that? And do you, in the markets you're in, more importantly, do you worry about that?
Yeah, look, we don't invest in China for a reason. Where do you start? But the innovation can come from anywhere and everywhere. And it can even come from, you know, the government, i.e., India. The government innovated in financial services. Who would have thought that? They're the people who are innovating in payments and financial services. In Russia, it's coming from the incumbent banks. We're all out there bank bashing. But it's the incumbents, Sberbank and Tinkoff, who are the innovators in that ecosystem. And there's many reasons for that. Southeast Asia, we said it's ride sharing who are innovating. In Brazil, it's actually pure fintech. Hence, we've got a lot of assets in Brazil. So the beauty of what we do is that every market is uniquely different and is shaped by what the banks are doing, the regulator, the telcos, social media, e-commerce, new economy, people like us with our capital, education, wealth levels. And as opposed to a one-size-fits-all, you know, we go to each market and we find a totally different playing field that throws out a totally different set of opportunities. And in China, in the case of China, throws out nothing.
Bahadır, it's so interesting because your business has been built by partnering with pretty large, potentially scary partners. How do you navigate the fact that you rely on these relationships and perhaps the possibility that they may want to do this business, or what dynamics are there, if any?
Honestly, we were scared. You know, when we started, I always think, okay, when you build Facebook, where there's a word MySpace, when MySpace exists, right? These are not dependent on each other, right? It's just something from scratch. But when you come out and say, guys, I'm about to disrupt roaming, and I depend on your infrastructure. Now that's a very, very interesting balance to keep. Now, one of the things we observed with telcos, definitely, some of them approached us saying, guys, you know, this is cool. We like it because telcos know about the silent roamers. You know, the biggest telco in Singapore, 82% of their customers don't activate a roaming plan. That's a huge number, and these are actual numbers. 82% of their customers buy a SIM card at the next destination at the airport. Now, the telcos already know that roaming is somehow broken, and their retail teams are very open to working with a distributor in a sense. We are their digital distributor. They are very open to working with us. They go, okay, these are my eSIMs. Let's integrate our APIs and you know, start selling my connectivity. Some telcos are really you know, open about this, but some telcos, on the other hand, hate us. Like, they literally hate us. We've seen these cases a lot of times, and we've seen angry people showing us as a case study in telco events. I was surprised to see our name on the stage. One big telco put us on the stage and says, this is a company that we all have to be careful about. I'm like, no, guys, no, you don't need to be scared of us. And why are you talking about me? Talk something else, you know, talk about the industry, things like this. So it is scary, but One good news, I think, it's very confidential. This just happened 10 days ago, and hopefully we are going to announce it. One of the biggest telcos in the world has just invested in us. So they thought, you know, guys, this is the future, and we want to be part of this future. And hopefully we are going to announce this very soon. They will announce that. We will announce that. So I think telcos are starting to like us. It's happening. It's happening.
Pieter, Manuel. Pieter?
Sorry?
Did you have something to add to that? I couldn't tell.
Oh, no. I'm good. I was just super excited to get from Bahadır, so I'm curious. We'll chat later about it.
Manuel, how does this dynamic affect you? You're obviously playing about not only a bunch of big companies out there, but big governments and others who care about what you're doing. What's that dynamic like for you?
It is similar. On the one hand, it's very scary. Like we have big competitors, the market leaders, virtually writing us emails that we shouldn't join the space. At the same time, it also, in a way, is a proof of concept. So when you receive emails from big utility companies, for example, that say, well, we love what you do. Is there a possibility to partner up? So I really believe what Pieter also said before. There is like great global opportunity, but there's also when you are local and work with local partners, you can be better in many aspects than the big global competition. So that is what we have also realized. Like there are like some minor aspects in which our product just performs better or is better suited to customers' preferences. And even though there are these big competitors that send emails and say you shouldn't be in the market, those small things, those like culturally adjusted things, just make a huge difference. They don't appear to do so, but in the end, it proves.
Does data change all this? I'll throw this to any of you. What I mean by that is Netflix, Amazon Prime stood up also in 100+ markets, and they have a data advantage. So they can start any way they want, but in the end, local is not a country. It's you as the individual. They see how you behave and what you like, and you see more of it, and then you see more of it. And there may be sensitivities market by market, but in many respects, over time, it seems like local could become the individual. Is that true? Or will local matter and the nuance and understanding, regulation certainly will matter, but will other things matter, or will data actually take care a lot of what it means to go local? Pieter, you want to take a cut?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and like everyone is always saying like how important data is, and it is, but in the end, and we're seeing that, and Dave, like keep get your thoughts on this as well, but in the end, it's judgment. Like, what do you do with the data? How do you interpret the data? So, like before SEQUOIA, I actually worked for Amazon, and I've seen how much data we had back then, and what we could do with it. But ultimately, it's still about the judgment that you would do with it, how you surprise people, and I still, no matter how much we invest in data companies and in AI companies, the insights of the people behind it, how they act on that data, and what design choices they make in their product and in the human angle of their product, I think is still going to be paramount, and that might not go away. But maybe I'm naive. We'll see.
Dave?
Yeah, look, just one general point and then the second specific to Pieter's point. General point, like if big tech is allowed, they can do anything. I look at financial services and Facebook and Amazon, and they're coming gradually, then suddenly. And the only thing that will inhibit them or stop them is regulation and legal saying no. Facebook can't be the biggest money transfer company in the world because it could overnight if it was allowed. So these things are, coming in certain shapes and forms. But more specifically on data and just localization, globalization, specifically we look at a lot of companies in Africa, and there's a lot of valley-based companies attacking Africa now from the valley, which I'm allergic to, just naturally speaking, but it doesn't make it wrong. Because they're always using best-in-class AI, big data, and they're attacking understanding the consumer in Africa based on their data points and their smartphone usage to score them to, in many cases, give them credit of all things. That seems to be working in a first iteration, but it will have lots of issues because obviously giving credit, you got to collect credit, and if you can't collect credit, you got to try and somehow bring these people to court or seize assets in different shapes or forms, depending on the structure of the business and the type. But the data aspect is becoming bigger and bigger, but I think you need to layer that over with localization as well to succeed, especially in financial services.
Well, folks, we could keep you for hours, and this is such a rich conversation. We're running a bit out of time, but I want to throw out one last one, and each of you could just give a quick reaction to this. I mean, it's become almost a cliche to say that COVID has accelerated human behavior around the world when it comes to technology adoption, right? People are buying more than ever before, using mobile money for the first time ever before, getting educated in ways they didn't do before, using telemedicine in ways they didn't before, and much more. And I'm just curious, in your world, in your lens, what have you seen most accelerated by COVID, and what will excite you coming out of it? Adi, could I start with you?
Well, in our case, the observation was very simple. People don't want to touch SIM cards anymore. And when they went to the airport, they literally want to get out of the airport in seconds and go to their hotels. They don't want to queue at a store. They don't want to talk to someone selling SIM cards at the store. The beauty of eSIM in our case is it's instant contact-free connectivity. I take out this phone, install an eSIM, and I'm done. Me and my phone. No more touching SIM cards, no more talking to someone trying to sell me SIM cards. So in our case, we have observed that people enjoy the contact-free connectivity.
Dave? Yeah, no, I think this is where we all pitch our own kind of thesis. But I'm aligned. Like, in my world, the SIM card is cash, and it's bank branches and it's bank workers. There was a secular trend away from all that. The numbers don't lie. And what COVID did was give us a step change in that direction to the point where even my mum is gone digital. And that's what happens in windows like this. And then they get used to it and they don't go back. So as much as COVID has been a negative for digitization and for what we do, it's been a net positive.
Pieter, your turn.
Yeah, I agree with Dave on the fintech angle. I think anything that is e-commerce indeed will have suddenly accelerated massively, and it will go back slightly after COVID, but it will continue at a much higher level than before, and that's been very big, and that's been instant. What I think is going to be interesting to see is many consultants for many years have made a lot of money on the back of this whole digital transformation theme, so to speak. And many enterprises have entertained that, but have moved slow. And what has happened is during COVID, I think budgets were frozen and enterprise software slowed down temporarily. But behind the scenes, all enterprises were like, wow, we've been too slow, we've been too late, we need to accelerate this. And what we're starting to see is that for some of our enterprise software companies, Q4 is already the largest quarter ever. And I think Q1 and the rest of next year is going to be huge because the budgets are unfrozen. They feel that COVID to some extent is behind, and they've had a lot of pain from not being sufficiently digital, not having enough data, not having enough automation. And so we're expecting a lot of acceleration there with a delay post-COVID.
Manuel, bring us home.
There were really two trends for us that COVID has brought, and both are actually positive. The first one is people stay more at home, so they use more energy. And that is great for us because we do save energy and we do save CO2 by doing so. The second trend is more in line with the vision we have. We have seen, especially in the early days of COVID, that suddenly cars stopped driving, plants didn't produce, and the air quality in India or in China went up, and we see like wolves in the middle of some city centers. And I think what COVID also brought with it is kind of this belief that we can do something about it, that we as a human race can virtually make a dent in huge challenges that are facing our planet. In our case, it's climate change and the awareness of climate change. So for us as PowerX having this vision, that was actually a net positive.
In these challenging days, it's very easy to not focus on the fact that we are actually living in a days of wonder. And you have articulated perfectly in your different lenses what remarkable things that you are building and supporting people building overall. And the greatest gift of all a person could give another one is teaching. And you have taught us tremendous amounts of insight today. And I want to thank you all and for this amazing gathering that we've all been a part of today. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here.